Good evening,
We have
ladies.
the same colored shirts on tonight. That's very strange. We both have yellow.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, the Package Tourist, and the magical mystery tour called life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight's guest is esteemed football author Tom Danyluk. Tom hails from Oak Park, Illinois, and has worked as a football writer for the past 30 years and has been a member of the Pro Football Writers Association since 1987 and has been writing for Pro Football Weekly since 2004. His work has earned enormous and well-deserved praise from his peers in the profession. Legendary football writer Paul Zimmerman declared in 2007 that, quote, day in, day out football writing, I think the most knowledgeable person covering the game is Tom Danyluk, unquote. His first book, The Super 70s, From Pro Football's Greatest Era, was released in 2005. His second book, The Lost Super Bowls, was released in 2017. His third book, None Yards, 30 Years of John Madden, the Broadcast Booth, A Verbal History of the Late John Madden, was released in 2018. His fourth book, Majesty and Mayhem, Pro Football in the 1980s, was released in 2022. And tonight, we will be discussing his latest release, Echo Warfare, Pro Football of the 1990s, a brilliant history of the NFL in the 1990s, which was released last September. Tom, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on again.
Thank you. It's been a couple years. I think we talked, 2023 was the last time you and I got together.
That's right. Yes. Now, Tom, when you were writing and researching Echo Warfare, what interesting discoveries and new insights did you uncover about that decade in the NFL?
Well, the approach I took to this was not so much to present the decade as a Michael McCambridge timeline and dig things up. I kind of took the approach that I wrote down about 25 or 30 different things from that decade that I remember being significant, whether it's certain players or certain teams. And in this short chapter style that I've kind of fallen into, wasn't so much about me digging up new information, was just presenting my views, opinions, and memories of these individual games, players, coaches from that era. So it really wasn't a research dig more than it was me just laying out how I remember that decade of 30 plus years ago already.
Okay. Tom, who do you think was the greatest passer of the 1990s? Who was the definitive quarterback during that decade in your view?
Well, I think Marino was still the number one guy yardage wise. And if I had to pick one, though, I think Steve Young, when he took over, his run from 92 to 98, to me, was the definitive guy from that decade. I mean, from what Marino did, I put him as the definitive guy in the 80s. I don't want to give him both decades. But by the time Young took over, he was well seasoned. He was schooled under Montana and Walsh, and for a couple of years, the Seaford operation there. And I just look at him as being the guy that really had San Francisco in the mix every single year. Even when they were after they lost Ricky Waters, they still had 3 or 4 more playoff years. Yardage wise, it's Marino, but the word definitive, I think it's Steve Young, with his addition of mobility, which we still see now as being a big part of the quarterback position in today's game.
So you put Steve Young like above Troy Aikman or Kelly or even Elway at the tail end of his career?
I do. Aikman, to me, was more like the Bart Starr of the 90s, where, he didn't really have to carry that team with his arm. And there are too many games out there where, Aikman goes out and throws for 400 yards and puts 45 points on the board to win the game. He didn't have to do that. So he played within that Cowboy run-based attack where, he did a wonderful job, but I look at him more as a Bart Starr than as a one of these real gunners.
Okay.
You mentioned who else? Oh, Elway. Yeah, the problem with Elway is he had so much damage to his resume in terms of those Super Bowl losses. And then there was that dead zone period there in the mid-'90s where the Broncos were kind of irrelevant until Shanahan arrived. So that's a perception issue with Elway. And then by the time he got to those Super Bowls, again, he didn't have to win it by himself. And he was kind of fell back into what Aikman was doing with, Aikman had Smith, this guy, Elway had Terrell Davis.
Yeah.
So I just think Young, and for again, definitive with Rice, Taylor, and the way those guys were just tearing the league up for, 91 he took over, 91 through 99, that's the guy for me in the decade, definitive quarterback.
Okay. Let's go to the ground game now. Who was the greatest runner of the 1990s?
Well, that's Barry Sanders, and I think you might be able to throw the greatest runner in history at that point on this guy, that same label. I don't think for what Sanders did, and the thing that bothers me most about Sanders was the rap he got for he was caught in the backfield too many times, and that was just, to me, it was a moronic attack on the guy because defenses knew that he was going to get the ball, so of course they're going to catch him once in a while, right behind the line.
Yeah.
But the way that it was a whirlwind type activity when he got the ball, and start, and the cuts. And, I was at the game one time in the early 90s, opener against the Steelers, and he just faked Rod Woodson into a knee injury. And that kept him out for the whole 95. Just, boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3, punch, and now Rod Woodson's down, and Sanders is 15 yards past him already.
Yeah.
So that's the guy for me, Barry Sanders. I don't know if I can. Emmett, yes, in terms of volume, but Sanders in terms of style and volume and flair.
Because in a sense, Sanders had the much tougher job because he was playing for a subpar team when you consider it, whereas Smith had that super offensive line and all that. So you get that's why you give Sanders the nod because he had to overcome greater obstacles than Emmett did.
Sure. Well, plus just again the ability. Emmett was not a dazzler. You don't look at too many great Emmitt Smith moves in a highlight film. Usually he's blowing through there, and then it's open field. He takes off. With Sanders, he's faking guys one-on-one and making cuts and spinning and that 360 move that he had, and that's greatness. Okay. If you put Barry Sanders behind the Cowboy line down there in Dallas during the Jimmy Johnson era, I think we're going to see a lot of the same stuff, and probably a lot more passing from Dallas because teams are going to have to gear up for Sanders.
Okay.
Can't play these games with that guy. That's dynamite.
Who was the most underrated football player during the 1990s in your view, Tom?
I look at John Taylor in San Francisco. Now, again, he was pretty much finished by 95. I just think he was the kind of guy that once he got the ball in his hands, 75 yards was not necessarily an outrageous proposition. But Rice overshadowed him. I don't know if Taylor could have carried a team by himself in a different city. He would have to have the quarterback to get that slant to him. But I don't know how many Pro Bowls the guy made. But on offense, I have to say John Taylor in San Francisco for sure. I don't know if I have, Matthew, a defensive guy for you.
Okay. Who were, in your view, who was the greatest coach of the 1990s, or greatest coaches of the 1990s in your view?
Yeah, I think Johnson has to sit at the top of that list for sure. I don't know if there's anybody that really pushes him in that regard. Jimmy Johnson, for what he built, we know the story about him. I'm sure you watched the America's Team thing where we're still praising Jerry Jones 35 years later. But Parcells, yeah, great. He got the Patriots to the Super Bowl, and he got the Jets to the AFC Championship, but it wasn't the same decade for him as it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Again, keep in mind that the AFC was still the dog conference up until Denver seized control of the league in '97.
Yeah.
So we're not even talking about AFC teams other than of course, Buffalo in that run. It was almost expected unless he was going to win the whole way through. So Johnson's the top guy in the whole decade. And then, Shanahan, of course, he had that run in Denver, but then after he lost Elway, and, of course, he lost Terrell. That magic kind of left the room, too.
Yeah. Getting back to Jimmy Johnson, what struck me was how innovative he was. Please tell our audience, how did he revolutionize NFL Draft Day and how players were selected in the draft? Because that's one of his great innovations, because he did not only altered how NFL players were drafted. I got this during my own research. Even an interview like NBA Draft Day and even NHL Draft Day, because I remember Dean Lombardi, the general manager of the LA Kings, he got some of his concepts of shifting up and down in the draft from Jimmy Johnson, and he decided, let's try it in the NHL. So can you tell our audience about how he revolutionized how draft choices were selected?
Well, the number one thing with Johnson is his eye for talent. That's okay, because he may have a system, which we'll talk about here in a second. But if he doesn't have that great eye for talent, that system doesn't mean anything. So you go back and look who he recruited in Miami and the number of Pro Bowlers and Hall of Famers and first-round draft picks that were coming out of the Hurricanes from that second half of the 90s, or the 80s. Okay, that's the first thing that's in place with this guy. And then, of course, he gets to Dallas, and this is pre-free agency, so you can't rebuild by signing other people's players. So, again, this is where Johnson came up with the new numbering system. Because if you remember, his whole deal was we're going to build this team on volume of picks and trade people away and trade down and move and accumulate players. So once you have that in place, then this great eye for talent takes over, and then you could start finding these terrific gems in rounds 3, 4, and 5, and that's where he really made his money with the Cowboys, because you can pick the stars for sure, but you have to fill that roster out. And Dallas was a deep football club until free agency kind of picked that thing apart. But it was his numbering system. What is a draft pick worth? In terms of points, okay, if it's a first round, what's it going to cost you? How many points? Okay, it's going to cost you X amount of second rounders, X amount of third rounders. He put that whole thing together just to give him some type of footing on how to read the NFL draft and how to maneuver it.
Yeah.
And are we saying it's the best system or no? But it's some system, right?
Yeah,
and that's where he made his mark. But it's really not talked about that much anymore, because everyone does it. Everyone just kind of assigns. Okay, if you want my number 27 pick, I have to have your second at 14, and I've got to have a third and a fifth. Okay, there's your total points. So he put a numbering system on it, and it helped the Cowboys build, but it didn't help the Cowboy franchise since. You see, because that same system's in place, and they've not been the same drafting team in 30 years.
Yeah, but thing is, though, when Plan B free agency came in, he ruthlessly exploited it, didn't he, Tom?
No, because Johnson was only there for one. Oh, Plan B?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was talking full-blown free agency.
Okay, so sorry. Yeah, but I'm talking Plan B, because didn't he ruthlessly
Plan B, sure, but he wasn't getting any killers in Plan B. I mean, he was bringing a lot of people in, right? But these were, again, remember, Plan B was you just other teams left these people unprotected.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the bottom of their roster, or people that were old that they didn't want to give a big fat contract to, like guys like Roger Craig, the Plan B guy, leaves San Francisco. So there were some names there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like he was winning a Super Bowl on the haul of Plan D. It was the Super Bowl based on his drafts. I don't think there was one Cowboy starter in the 92 or 93 championship that were Plan B guys.
Okay. Tom, what is your theory after the Dallas won Super Bowl 30? How come they could not sustain their dynastic success? I mean, the talent was there. They should have dominated the rest of the decade. What is your analysis? Why did the Dallas dynasty basically collapse after Super Bowl 30?
Well, there are three reasons for that.
Okay.
The first one was that the core that Johnson had built was that when they hired Barry, they took the foot off the gas. They took the hands off the throat of that team. And he let them breathe. And the common theme you heard from a lot of the players was like, he let us be men. He assumed we're going to be accountable. So he really allowed a relaxed atmosphere to grow down there, where Johnson was just in control of everything, and obviously won with that type of tyrannical approach. But Switzer inherited the Cadillac, or the Porsche, and Jerry Jones hands him the keys and says, "Here you go. Don't mess it up." So he was kind of a laissez-faire thing. That's the first thing, because Switzer really was just looking to get through that first contract without shaking things up, and he was never a hammer coach to begin with. Secondly was free agency. When wide-open free agency got going in '93, they went after the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And you start stealing, Stepnoski leaves the center, the linebackers start to go, the Alvin Harper, who really is, they never replaced him at that second wide receiver spot. That hurt big. So, it was just the league piranha'd the Cowboys in that regard. And then the third piece of it was that Jerry Jones is not really a master of talent analysis and picking players. And look at the Dallas drafts in the second half of the decade, the 90s, and there's just not a lot there to get excited about. And you could never find somebody to replace the tight end that they had, not until years later with Witten. So those three things, if I had to pick one, I'd say free agency, going in there and just plucking players out, and then Jones not being able to replace them with his alleged eye for talent.
Okay. Let's shift to another franchise now. Do you consider Marv Levy's 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances one of the 10 greatest coaching feats in pro football history?
I'd have to go through and come up with 10, but you know what? On the top of my head, it really is a big deal what he did.
Yeah.
I could see 4 over 6 years. No, we're not going to talk about that. 4 over 5. This is 4 straight years coming out of the AFC. And it was just, they wouldn't go away. And yes, it absolutely was. But why they couldn't win, it's a different story. I think they just ran into better teams after the Giant game. But, Buffalo was just a super solid, and Bill Polian built the thing with his draft expertise.
Yeah.
But it absolutely was. And when I hear people mock the Bills or losing this, they weren't there, or they weren't there, or they're just pile of runners, because it was really something special to watch the Bills just fight their way out of that with a couple of great playoff games. The big comeback against Houston.
Yeah.
Kelly gets knocked out in the playoffs a couple times, and it was a fantastic run. I remember I saw Marv Levy in a restaurant years later in Chicago. I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. And I don't like to do this, but I finally went over to him and I said, Coach, this is what you did was one of the great things I've ever seen in pro football, going to 4 straight Super Bowls. And all he said to me was, almost to Everest. We almost got to the peak. But it certainly was one of the great top 10 coaching feats, I think, in the modern era.
I'll tell you this, Tom. When I was interviewing Don Beebe, the receiver, for my own book, Lords of the Gridiron 2, what impressed me was that the players believed in Marv Levy. They absolutely believed in him. They had absolute faith in his leadership and all that. Tom, in your opinion, what is your personal analysis? What was the fatal flaw that led Buffalo to lose 4 straight Super Bowls? If you could put your finger on it, what is your analysis on those 4 consecutive Super Bowl losses?
Okay. The first one, as we know, that could have fallen in their favor if he hits that very difficult kick.
Yeah.
Okay. That believe me, as you know, you remember watching that game.
Yeah.
They were not manhandled by any means. The Giants played keep away.
Yeah.
And Kelly wasn't able to get the point machine going. So that one, okay, fair and square, we lost. The next year, they ran into what I consider one of the great teams of the modern era with Washington.
Yeah.
And I talk about that extensively in this book, that this is a team that people, unless you really were paying attention to pro football in 1991, you just kind of like, who was the quarterback? Who was their top running back? They didn't have a lot of stars. That team, for whatever reason it was, they were playing absolutely spectacular football for a 16-game season plus the playoffs, and the Bills ran into that.
Yeah.
Okay? So now we're 0-2. And now we go into Dallas, and if you remember the early stages of that Cowboy game, I think the Bills did jump out ahead. I don't know if they were up 10 or up 7, but then the turnover started, and now at this point, here we go again. Now it's a psychological thing, and Daryl Talley was kind enough to give me the halftime mood of all 4 games in those, and then in the Cowboy one, he's like, the attitude went from, oh boy, here we go again. We're not going to screw this thing up, are we?
Yeah.
And it became a mental thing. They got it together the next year, and if you remember, they had the lead in the first half of that second Dallas
That's
game.
right, yeah.
And the Cowboy talent took over, and more turnovers.
Yeah.
So, to sum it up, turnovers are what screwed the Bills.
Yeah.
in the three of the 4 losses.
Yeah, I mean, when I was talking to Don Beebe, he said there was. I told him if Norwood had connected on that field goal in Super Bowl 25, he said, yeah, it would have tipped the psychic scales in our favor. But he said after that, after the Washington thing, he said they were carrying a gigantic primate on their backs. They just couldn't shake it. They just couldn't shake it. You know, that it's a great tragedy. It's very sad and all that. Yeah.
It is, and they were a hell of a team, and I will never mock them, and I defend them anytime the names come up. This Buffalo Bills are not to be mocked.
Yeah,
they were a terrific team from even 88 and 89, where they were a playoff team. You know, that was a hell of a good run they put together.
Yeah. One thing I give for Marv Levy, one of the greatest, he along with George Allen, one of the greatest coaches, you know, and Bud Grant, and making special team. He never used the word special teams. He always talked about kicking teams. Basically, making his kicking teams a prime unit. In other words, not just for cast-offs, but a truly elite unit. And of course, his work with Steve Tasker with the Bills is just incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, it's that, and as well, they had Ted Marshall-Broda calling plays in there. Yep. He was the offensive coordinator for a couple of those big years.
Yeah.
They were. If you think about the defensive haul they had, with the players Polian brought in with Cornelius Bennett and Bruce Smith and Shane Conlon, and we got that Leonard Smith to come over and play cornerback from the Cardinals. I mean, there were no chumps on that team. Trust me.
Yep.
No guests on that Bills team.
That's right. Let's talk about Mike Shanahan, because all those years of watching the AFC go down in flames and all that, and finally he turned it around, and I was so glad when he did that. I was always rooting for the AFC during those 90s, man. I just wanted that streak to end. How was Mike Shanahan able to get the Broncos to win those 2 straight Super Bowls, Tom?
Well, he did have that. Let's go back to where he started. He was a coach with the Raiders for a very short time. And that didn't work out, obviously, with Al Davis gave him the boot. Then he goes to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And remember the success they had. So now he's going in there, and I'm not so sure how much Shanahan injected of his own, but more than picking up what Holmgren and Walsh had put together there. But those 49ers teams always had a running game, right? They had Craig or they had Ricky Waters. So he goes to Denver. And who does he run into but Terrell Davis? Yeah. Now that guy falls into his lap. Now all of a sudden he has a 1,000-yard-plus guy right there that he had no idea he was even going to get. And Elway now has somebody in the backfield that people have to worry about.
Yes.
And of all things, that combination of Davis and the fact that now John Elway, just think about it. What if Elway would have had Terrell Davis in 1987 or 90 or 92, right? Yep. There was no such thing. He was winning with guys that were just average running backs, Tony Nathan types. All of a sudden, you have that 1-2 punch in your offensive backfield. You're gonna be in every game. Yeah. Where Shanahan had to make his money was when was defensively. Yeah. Getting themselves a pass rush, and just enough defense. Romanowski comes in. You bring in some free agents. Neil Smith, they brought in from Kansas City. So it was just, I think, with Shanahan, the stars were aligned properly on personnel.
Yeah.
Because he was never able to replicate it after Elway and Davis left him.
Yep. Yeah, I always thought that was a tragedy with Terrell Davis. In that sense, he was reminding me of the 1990s version of Gale Sayers. When Gale Sayers was healthy, he could run wild. It's same with Terrell Davis. When he was healthy, he was absolutely fantastic, but injuries cut short his career just like it did with Gale Sayers, don't you think?
Well, that's absolutely true. Davis not as flashy or darting or dazzling as Sayers, but for sure, I mean, hey, he's in the Hall of Fame now, and I'm not so sure if I would have voted for him because of the short duration of his career, but the numbers were immense. And again, when you have that kind of weaponry behind you, and you're John Elway, wow, I mean, who do you cover? What's the defensive game plan that day? It's a tough one.
Okay. Tom, in your opinion, what was the NFL's greatest crisis during the 1990s, if there was a crisis?
Yeah, that was a pretty breezy era for them.
Okay.
For the league. The 80s was steroids, right? Late 70s was drugs. The whole head injury thing didn't really get any kind of momentum behind it until well into the 2000s. That, to me, was a very crisis-free era for that league. Things were really going well. They were picking up TV contracts. ESPN's involved, and now we're start spreading out the games on different nights and of the week. And I just think it was halcyon days, the 1990s, not a crisis-free era.
Okay. Where did the NFL make its greatest area of progress during the 1990s?
Oh, greatest area of progress. Well, you start getting more and more qualified and capable black coaches moving into these positions. You remember Art Shell, I think, was the first coach, and then Tony Dungy and Dennis Green shows up, and we're starting to get so that whole glass ceiling was starting to really not get shattered, but it was being punctured.
Okay.
So from that, in that regard, I think that's where the NFL made progress. More about let's find out who the real coaches are here, not just just the white assistant coaches. Let's go find out what some of these talented black guys out there. Let's put them in position. Let's go from there. And of course, Tony Dungy proved that right out of the gate that he was a capable man.
Oh, yeah, and many others, I mean, the thing is with poor Dennis Green, I mean, a great coach and all that, but he just couldn't get his team to the Super Bowl and all that. That's like another tragedy there.
Yeah, that's true. Didn't have a great quarterback. Well, he did. 98, different story, right? He did have a great team, but we talked about that as well. But so I got off track there a little bit, Matt.
Okay. Tom, please tell our listeners, where can readers find your books?
Amazon.com, where we can find anything in the entire world these days. So it's Echo Warfare, Pro Football of the 1990s on Amazon.com, published September 20.
Okay.
It hit the shelves.
Okay. Tom, any idea what your next book project will be and when we can expect its release?
I think I'm going to go back to the 70s. And revisit that. The first 70s book I did was really pretty much like a collection of Playboy interviews. There's not a lot of writing in there for me. It's some sidebars and things, but really I let the players and the coaches and the announcers carry that book, which just felt appropriate at the time because these stories, there was too many good things that these guys had to say that I didn't want to have to cut. So I will probably go out and revisit the 70s. And use a lot of my own writing and my own insights on that, and get into some of the players and games, just like I did for the 80s and 90s.
But I'll say this, Tom, your book on the 70s was still, those players' interviews was absolutely fantastic material. I mean, when I was doing research for my own book, your book was an incredible source of a valuable source material there. So it's fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Go out and get it, okay? Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No, really. I mean, your stuff is first-rate source material for anyone doing research on the 70s there. Magnificent, in my opinion. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom. Well, thanks for appearing on the show. It's great to have you on. I can't wait to have you on again. Let me know when it comes out, okay, Tom?
I shall probably get started on it. I need a break. I need to get off that computer for a couple of months. But I'll probably pick it up in the spring and go from there. But maybe 2 years from now, we'll talk again, Matt.
You got it, okay?
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for my next show where I'll be interviewing author Annie Zaleski. Thank you and good night.